Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar today, Business Advisory Services Implementation Training. And today we're specifically going to look at how you can use the SME Debtors Systems Manual. My name's Peter Towers. I'm the Managing Director of ESS BIZTOOLS. Thank you for your support of ESS BIZTOOLS and ESS BizGrants. And as I said just a few moments ago, if you have any questions today on any aspect of the services being supplied by ESS BIZTOOLS, can you type your question into your computer and I will answer the questions later on in the webinar. If you're watching this webinar at a time that is more convenient for you, you could send me an email if you've got any questions. Thanks. peter@essbiztools.com.au. Longest debtors days outstanding in the world. That's not a title that anyone in Australia would have been happy about, I don't think, but that's what a UK organisation who conducted research over 100 countries looking at debtors days outstanding decided in 2016 that Australia had the longest debtors days outstanding in the world. We were 26.4 days longer than the normal 30-day trading period, obviously making it 56.4 days. Now, I've seen debtors days outstanding significantly higher than that figure, but that was the average, 56.4. At the time, Kate Carnell, who was then the Australian government's small business ombudsman, indicated that debtors was the silent killer of modern business. And she also indicated that 90% of small business failures, according to her organisation, are due to poor cash flow management, of which debtors is one of the biggest components. 90% of small business failures originate back to this debtors area. According to Anthill magazine that published a report on debtors days outstanding towards the end of 2020, the current debtors days outstanding is 56 days. So in 3.5 years, the improvement has only been 0.4 of a day. And this is after the Prime Minister promised that federal government departments would improve their payments to SMEs. And in fact, he instructed federal government departments to make the payments within 30 days. And some of them were substantially longer than that beforehand, as we all know. And the Prime Minister also urged big business to make payments to SMEs within 30 days. And I'm sure we all saw the publicity and the articles in the Financial Review and the Australian and other publications where various big business CEOs gave an undertaking that they would start making payments within 30 days. Yet the overall improvement, according to the Anthill magazine, was only 0.4 of a day. We've still got a long way to go because 3.5 years ago, when the survey was published, Australia was around 3 to 4 days behind the next worst country in debtors days outstanding. Now, why is this so? Why have we got this big problem with debtors? I think a lot of it's to do with the systems that have been implemented. I don't know what some of the other countries are doing, but I think there's a lot of work that we can do in Australia. And that's this very important subject that I want to talk to you today, because in this period of accountancy firms basically signing on to diversify their services, I want to make sure that the subscribers to ESS BIZTOOLS are taking advantage of the material that we've produced in our product packages to assist you to be at the forefront of offering these types of services to your clients, to get their debtors days outstanding at the lowest possible amount. Because there's a lot of money tied up in reducing debtors days outstanding from 56 days to 40 days. That 16 days is a considerable amount of money that your clients are going to have reflected back in their bank account. So I now am going to take you to a review. I just want to make sure that there's no questions at this stage. I see some more people have joined us since we started. That's great. Welcome. If you have any questions, can you type your questions into your computer, please? And I will answer them later in the webinar. So I'm just going to share now to our website. So you should now be able to see the members home page on your website. If you are not familiar, you might be working in a section of your firm that doesn't normally look at our material. On the left-hand column is the individual products. These are all available to a gold subscriber, and obviously there are different packages that are available. But what we're going to be looking at today is the SME Debtors Systems Manual. I'm just going to click onto it. And we'll go to the manual. There's a video there that you can watch. My apologies for this slippage. Our web guys having a look at it to see what's causing that problem, but hopefully it doesn't interfere too much with your viewing. You then have a list of the material that's within the system. Just remember the procedure control form is there to guide you through the process, step by step. And we've got a range of forms that are included that you can click onto at any time. But my brief today is to look at the overall systems package, which is contained within paper 570033. And I've just got to share my screen again. So you can see what I've just brought up, and you should now be able to see the Business Advisory Services SME Systems Manual. So this is the template that's in your system that you can utilize to now customize the debtors system for your client. So you would badge this with your client's name and obviously your firm name and the date. In another section that we conducted a webinar on a couple of weeks ago, we went through the process of actually reviewing the debtors system. And now this is the updated, customized debtors systems manual for your client. So we have the contents. And you can edit any of this that suits your particular client's requirements. So introduction to an effective debtors management system. I think one of the problems and one of the reasons Australia might have this dubious award of the longest debtors days outstanding in the world is because there is no widespread use of a document like this, a debtors systems manual. I know some people have probably got them, and your firm may have been one of the firms that's introduced them. But in the main, when I go into offices and talk to people about their debtors system, I get bits of shocked looks, and it seems to be the most recent person hired who's got the problem of looking after the debtors. Doesn't seem to be a career prospect sort of role for a lot of organizations, whereas I think it should be. And at least we should give them the courtesy of giving them a written system to work from, rather than bits of notes stuck on the edges of computers and filing cabinets. That seems to be the main way that this knowledge, this corporate knowledge, is passed down from one to the other. And corporate knowledge is very important in a business. It's very important in accountancy firms or business advisory firms or bookkeeping firms. Therefore, it should be documented. I think so, can be handed down. And that will give some respect to the person that's doing the job. They'll understand it is important. And it is. A lot of money's tied up in debtors. And if debtors are poorly managed, it increases bad debts. And there's a real risk that there could be a substantial cost to the business through inappropriate management of debtors. And I'm going to talk about that shortly. But to give you an insight into what that relates to, it's the Personal Property Securities Register. Because within your clients, the key administration point for the Personal Property Securities Register will normally be the person looking after debtors. But it also involves people within the sales department having an awareness of it, making sure that there are terms of trades agreements and retention of title agreements included in the communication that goes to a business or a person being invited to be a new customer for your client's business, because it's necessary to undertake a registration process on the Personal Property Securities Register within a defined time, normally 21 days. And systems need to be working if that is going to be achieved. So you need to make sure that the person undertaking the debtors management is aware of all this. So let's just start going through it. We're going to talk about the director's guarantee form. Now, I've had people looking after debtors say, I don't know what to do with this. What do I do with it? Well, it should be going into a long-term permanent file. You don't want someone saying we're going to get rid of it in 3 years or 4 years, because it might be 7, 8, 9 years' time when, unfortunately, your client may need to activate the guarantee document that's been received. Welcome to new customer letter. I think that is very important. And we're going to have a look at a few of these external forms in a moment, but it's very important because it gives the opportunity for your client to confirm to their new customer their terms of trade, their trading hours, who to contact. But it also gives your client the opportunity to give a rousing welcome to their new customer. Welcome aboard. It's New Customers Night on the third Tuesday of each month. Come along and have a drink with us or a cup of coffee or whatever. It's a great sales opportunity to do some introductions. But it's also an opportunity to confirm the credit limit that this new customer's been placed on, and also to confirm the terms of trade. And if the new customer has specified certain requirements that they have before they'll make payment, they can be confirmed in the new customer's letter. Now, what might they be? They might be that the customer requires a health certificate before payment will be made. That might be because they're supplying food products and a health certificate's required. They may require weighbridge certificates. It doesn't really matter what it is. If the customer's specified that they require this information before they will make payment on a tax invoice, well, it's up to your client to make sure that they're going to supply it to them. So why not confirm it to them in their new customer letter? So if there is any misunderstanding, it should get clarified pretty quick. And another very important thing is if the customer is saying, we need all of the tax invoices for a month delivered to us in our agreed format with any supporting document by the 5th, 6th, doesn't matter which day, whatever day of the following month. Otherwise, payments will not occur until the following month. That's the cut-off dates, which a lot of companies, particularly big companies, have. And if your client is one day late, well, they'll wait another month for payment. And I've been asked to look at debtors systems in various businesses. And in one occasion, I had a client that I had worked on someone else in this basically the same industry, supplying the same group of customers, because I was doing a business plan. So I had a working knowledge of what was going on there. And their debtors days outstanding was about 40 days. They were going very nicely. And yet this other business that an accountant asked me to look at had debtors days outstanding way up nearly 100 days. And when we went into it, the reason was they were late with everything. They didn't supply the additional information the customer wanted. Immediately, the payment got pushed backwards. They didn't supply them by the dates that they required. They didn't answer questions that came in on various things. It just got put at the bottom of the pile and took weeks to get back. And they were late getting the statements out. Instead of getting them out within 24, at the maximum 48 hours after the end of a month, it was taking them 2 or 3 weeks. So you don't expect to get paid promptly. And they were sitting back saying, how come we got so much in debtors? How come these people won't pay us? So make sure your clients understand that. I've talked about the retention of title clauses, which really come into play with the personal property securities register. The preparation of the tax invoices should be a priority. I think tax invoices should be prepared daily and emailed to the client, and a due date for payment shown on the tax invoice. And then your client should have a follow-up prompt system, sending messages to the client 3 or 4 days before a payment's due. Now, there's a lot of people doing that because we all get them. And what do? Well, you tend to try to make sure you're going to make that payment on that date, don't you? So it's a great mechanism. The debtors days outstanding analysis should be prepared promptly at the end of a month, 24 to 48 hours after the end of the month. The leadership team should know what that magical figure is. I think it's one of the most important key performance indicators that your clients can keep if they're offering credit. If they're not offering credit, say never go there. But if they've got to give credit in their business, they need to know that figure. They need to be very conscious of trying to reduce it. And they should, as part of that reduction process, the leadership team should be involved in making sure the money's collected. Now, we all know that there's various businesses around the countryside delay making payments until someone, sometimes as high as the CEO of the supplier, contacts them. Well, that's the game, isn't it? And if that is required and someone in your client's team's got to go to the CEO and say, will you please make a follow-up phone call? There might be a few problems if the CEO finds that the system hasn't worked and information hasn't been getting sent to that customer, but your client staff will learn to live with that, won't they? Pardon me. So in the system, we have a debtor system checklist where you can go through and check that everything's been done. Now, this is the role that I think you should be doing. So the effective systems, it's covering some of those matters we've just talked about. I'm just quickly reading them to see if there's anything I did not mention in that opening overview. Declining a credit application letter, I think it's important. So if someone's applied for credit and management has decided not to grant it to them, I think you should have a letter in the system that goes back to that person saying or telling them that their credit application's been declined for whatever reason. They might be a customer, or they might be a frequent blogger on social media. They could be anyone. So give them a communication and the courtesy of telling them thank you for their application, but we're not going to give it to you. I think it's a good idea to make sure that the sales department's been advised that the new customer's been accepted, so they're all G'd up. They should be rolling out the welcome mat. They should be doing that for every customer, of course, no matter if they've been with the business for 25 years or 25 minutes, but we all know what happens. So at the first instance, they should be prompted that Bill Bloggs and Co. has applied for credit and with management's agreed to it. So you can now go out and sell to them, go out and do your promotions, do whatever salesmen do to make sales. So we're going to talk about a credit application form in a moment to make sure everything's covered. The debtors guarantee form. People need to realise that unfortunately, private companies can go broke, and most businesses like the idea of having directors' personal guarantees. So we've got a sample of one of those forms, declining letter, and so on. So the system, your subscribers, so you can go onto the system and have a look at this and work your way through. So I'm just going to go back now and pull up some of these forms so we can have a look at them. But before I do that, I'll just check to see that whether anyone has asked me anything. No one's got any questions. Okay. That's okay. So I'm just going to get out of there, and I thought I would have been out of there, and go back into our form. And I'm going to bring up the procedure control form, and that should now be on your screen. It's the document which, if you've been able to use any of our other product packages within ESS BIZTOOLS, you'll know that the procedure control form is the key document, the first document in each of our product packages, because it guides you through this process. So we're suggesting you read the paper which we've written on the Debtor Systems Manual first, paper 570033. If you click on that, you'll go to it. It just takes a little while on a webinar, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to bring them up and show you. The debtor systems checklist, the application to open an account, it's all there. So it's just guiding you through and saying, have you done all this? Now you can print that off and give it to your client so that they can be using that to follow through what is happening. And I'm going to go to the paper first. Well, that's where we were. Sorry, no, we don't have to go to that. We've already shown you the paper here is actually the template for the documentation. Let's go on to application to open an account. This is a form that your client's sales department should have, that they hand out to any people, or they email the form to them. It's a fairly comprehensive form, but if you need to edit it to suit your client's particular requirements, please do so. If you add material to it, I wouldn't mind knowing about it. Maybe we're going to change our master document. So if you could send that through to me, that would be great. What's the business do? How many employees? Who's their bank? Get as much information as possible is my theory on this, because your client's been asked to supply goods or services to these people who we basically don't know. We know nothing about them. I think it's courtesy that your client finds out a bit about this new customer and makes a decision. A bit more information if they're a sole trader or a partnership, and a company. Who are the directors? And make sure your client's doing some checking up on these people. So what's their credit facility? What are they applying for? And make sure they realise that they're applying for a terms of credit and that it's summarised. So that's the form, which hopefully you will be able to go through with your client and make sure that the person that's looking after debtors understands it so that it's properly implemented. The next item I want to refer to is I'm not going to go to the personal guarantee. It's a template. You should have a separate form produced by your client's solicitors, but I'm sure that you're familiar with it. One of the documents I want to show you, though, is the Personal Property Securities Register. I don't like this legislation. Oh, that's not the right document. So that's not the one I thought it was. The Personal Property Securities Register is an important area, even though I don't like the legislation. A lot of clients don't understand that they've got to register assets on this register. One of the problems is that their customer needs to sign the terms of trade or retention of title agreements, and that can cause a few problems. It really relates to property that's stored in someone else's premises, so that hasn't got much to do with debtors. Where the relationship with debtors comes in on the Personal Property Securities Register can primarily relate to people like tradies who are receiving progress payments from their client, and something goes wrong in that relationship. And your client could be accused by a liquidator of receiving a preferential payment. So there needs to be a trigger event occur with the customer in the first instance, and that basically is that a receiver, liquidator, or trustee in bankruptcy needs to be appointed to the client company, and that the liquidator then starts trying to recover or claw back money. So liquidators can attempt to claw back. What they are able to prove is a payment that's been made, so that it's a preferential payment. But they are meant to be able to document that. They've got to document it so that they can claim it. It's alleged that in some instances they just try to claim back all the money that's been paid in the 6 months previously. So obviously this is money that's coming to your client as a debtor, and that falls under the Personal Property Securities Register. So your subby client could register their customer on the Personal Property Securities Register if they wished, but they need to have a document signed by their customer, and some people are reluctant to do that. The other big problems with a lot of your subbies is if they have constructed something that is then on someone else's property and they're getting paid on a delayed payment basis. I know of a situation where someone supplied kitchen suites to 8 or 9 houses in a display village. So the kitchen suites, which were quite expensive, were installed into houses which were on someone else's property. The developer owned the houses, and they had these kitchen manufacturers' kitchens installed in them. A liquidator got appointed to that developer. The liquidator searched and found that the kitchens had not been registered on the Personal Property Securities Register and was able to claim it. He also claimed preferential payments, and that was the real link back to debtors. But I just wanted to make sure you realised also that your clients could be, in fact, leaving property with a business that they're dealing with, not in a normal stock type situation. This is where they had actually made kitchen suites and they were installed in houses, and they were to get paid a monthly rental. That's where the preferential payment allegation came from. And they were to receive a lump sum type payment after 2 or 3 years. but a liquidator in the interim sees those kitchen suites, 8 or 9 kitchen suites worth about $80,000 each. So it was a fair amount of money to lose that could have been protected if that business had registered that customer on the personal property securities register. They then got hit with a preferential payment allegation, which really comes back to debtors management, of about $150,000. So it was not a very happy situation at all. We have the welcome to new customer letter that you can look at. So I referred to that before. So this is a letter that could go to your client, could send to their customers, gives them an overview of what's been said, talking about retention of title agreements and terms of trade agreement and the personal guarantees from directors, etc. And I like these documents always been in duplicate. So you're telling your client to make sure their customer's got one to keep, but they sign the original and send it back to your client. There's some debt recovery letters in the system which you can look at. We've got a calculator for the debtors days outstanding, because I think you should be trying to make sure that your clients can calculate this regularly. So there's a little worksheet that you can use to take your client through how they can calculate that, to monitor it, because it's, as I said before, it's one of the key documents that they should have. We'll have a look at this one. I think this is the personal property securities register information that I thought I was getting before. The types of debtors transactions to consider that you need to be thinking about. I still see people sending invoices around that have got mention of a Ramalpa clause. They don't apply anymore, and they need to now have a new document produced. There's no excuse for this. The Personal Property Securities Act has now been in place for about 8 or 9 years, and a Ramalpa clause will not do your client any good. So there's some information there, and primarily we're supplying this initially to make sure the person administering the debtors has got an idea what this is all about, because at times the office manager might have just walked past the person and said to him or her, oh, you know, watch out and be conscious of registering on the Personal Property Securities Register. But do they know anything about it? Do they know what all this is? I think the more you can bring them in on this thing called the Personal Property Securities Register, the better chance that they will administer it, and they'll be very conscious of the time factors that are involved. So I think it's a good idea to make sure that they're fully aware of it. It's not easy legislation to understand. And as I said, there's still a lot of debate as to why it's there. So that's an overview of the debtors system. I'm just going to bring the manual back up. You can have a look at. I can't see that I have any questions. So those forms are just part of the documentation that will help you go through on this process. And hopefully you can utilize this system to conduct the review with the client. So that might be a couple of hours to review the debtor system, and then utilize this templated document to develop a document for your client. I think it's also desirable that in your letter back to your client, you indicate that you would like to be informed each time the person undertaking the debtor's role gets changed. The person might leave, or they might get moved to another job and someone else turns up. I think it's a good idea to spend half an hour to an hour this retraining the new person, taking them through the manual. And it's not a bad idea once a year to do a review on the debtor system, make it part of the engagement with the client. If you're supplying business advisory services, that each year you'll review the debtor system to see how it's all working on a day-by-day basis. Because this whole concept of supplying business advisory services to your clients is to deliver a service as if your person, the senior manager or the partner, was actually the accountant or the chief financial officer of that client. So sitting there all day, every day. You're not doing that. You're offering a virtual service, but it should be covering all aspects of the type of work that you would do if you were the incumbent as the accountant or the chief financial officer of the client. So you would be very concerned of what's going on in debtors management. This is an area that for the preparation of an annual set of accounts and a tax return, you probably pay very little interest in. But we are now running a CFO type service. And this is a key component of it. Debtors are a huge problem. It's quite easy to get bad debts. And a lot of that's to do with bad administration. They didn't scrutinize the application for someone to get credit properly in the first place. They didn't do some checking of their referees. They didn't follow through and make sure that invoices were sent promptly. Perhaps they just gave them credit like everyone else, and they started merrily thinking they could pay 80 or 90 days later. Maybe they should have been on 14 days for a 6-month trial to see how they went. It's a good idea to think about how Coca-Cola deal with their customers. You know, you're a new customer, you're on pretty strict payment terms right from the start. And some of their customers tell me you're always on pretty strict payment terms. And really, why not? Your clients are not banks. They're not in business to be giving credit to indefinitely to people. It's meant as a way to make a sale. It's not meant to be a financing activity. So you're a key person in making sure that the system works appropriately and that the investment in debtors is reduced as far as possible. The trading terms are 30 days. That's what the debtors days outstanding figure should be, 30 days. Not, as I saw one couple of years ago, 102 days average. So you can imagine what some of the debtors days outstanding were in that ledger. And the real problem there is the client didn't know what it was. They said to me, because I was running a seminar, and I said to them about debtors days outstanding. And one lady said, "Excuse me, can you tell me what a good figure is?" I said, "What's the terms of trade?" She said, "Oh, I don't know, probably 30 days. I'll have to ask." I said, "Well, 30 days. And she said, "Oh." And then we went into it and I said, "Well, what's yours?" She said, "I don't know." I said, "Doesn't your accountant talk to you about that?" She said, "I've never heard it mentioned. And I'm the bookkeeper in this business." So I said to her, "What's your turnover and how much is owed to debtors at present?" It was very simple. I said, "Well, you're sitting on 102 days. That's very high." Now, I did some work with that business later on and we got it down to around 60 days. Better than 102 days. Gave them a fair bit of cash. Their turnover was nearly $4 million. So there's a lot of money tied up in debtors. So there's a few more points included in this system that you can look at your leisure. If when you're going through it, you have any questions or suggestions, please contact us and we'll see what changes we can make. So I'm going to now go back to finish off on this today. I've got nothing else to add on debtors. It's all there for you to work your way through. And I'm just going to bring up the SME Debtors Systems Manual. We've done that. So our next members webinar is on next week, Tuesday, the 10th of August, because we're running them weekly at present, and that's going through to the end of August. And then we'll see what we're going to do in September. So next week, we're looking at the client seminars and webinars, which are part of the system that you're subscribing to if you're a gold subscriber. And even if you're definitely a silver subscriber, and if you're a bronze subscriber, you get a number of these, about 12 of these. And the one we're going to be looking at is characteristics of a well-run business. And the following week, on the 19th of August, we're going to be looking at retail pricing calculator, how your clients work out the mix of products that they've got, and they're all different. They got stars, they got cash cows, they got last year's fashions, which are really problem items. Very good stock, but it's the wrong color this year. And we've got the real bad lines, the dogs or whatever other name you want to give them. It's not very nice to dogs, is it? So I need another term for that. But it's how does all this come together with the various markups that work, the various product mixes, the overhead expenses and the wages. How does it all mix together? So at the end of the day, the retail or wholesale business gets very close to achieving the profit target that they factored into their business at the beginning of the year. So that's what we're going to talk about on the 19th. We have a system. You've got a system in your product. We want you to make sure you're using it. And then on the 20th of August, we've got predictive accounting. Now, this is important, and this one is going to feature the marketing director of Plan Guru, which is a USA company. So he's going to be talking to us from California. That's Trip Graham. He's the marketing director of Plan Guru. Plan Guru have written this special 3-in-1 financial forecast, budgets, cash flow forecasts, and projected balance sheets. And it's now available in 55 countries around the world. In Australia, its marketing and support services are headed up by Paul Barnaby, a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants. He used to be a senior partner of a second-tier firm. And Paul will also be talking, and I'll be talking about the contributions that ESS BIZTOOLS make to this overall product mix, which Paul's come up with the title of predictive accounting. It's a great title, and Paul's passionate that that is the real space that accountants should be involved in, helping clients to work out the future. The past is an historian's role. We're trying to look at the future. So that webinar is on Friday, the 20th at 12 noon AEST. And we have the final, no, not the final, we have a business health check overview looking at pharmacies and supermarkets, which you also have that in your product packages, on Tuesday, the 24th of August at 12 noon. And you can register for any of these by going to www.essbiztools.com.au and then clicking down to webinars and go to the members homepage. So thank you very much for your support of ESS BIZTOOLS and ESS BizGrants. I'm just going to check again to make sure no one's left me a message. You haven't. I hope that means that I've answered all of your questions. But if you think of some questions later on, or you've been watching this webinar at a time that suits you a bit better, and you think of some questions then on debtors, or for that matter, any other matter relative to the products and services that ESS BIZTOOLS and ESS BizGrants are producing, please send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and either I or one of my team will get back to you and give you the answer. If you're in the areas that are caught up now in the latest COVID-19 lockdowns. Our thoughts are with you. Please stay safe. And I look forward to talking to you next week when we have our next webinar for our members. Have a great day. Goodbye. And I hope you really are in a safe situation. Thank you.